Hello. Today I'm going to talk about prepping a difficult site. By prepping a site, I don't mean amending the soil to suit the needs of certain plants. You should use plants that are adapted to the soil you have, which generally means just use native plants, because they are, and they will adapt to the soil. The plants turned, the rubble pile that the glaciers left into the most incredible fertile soils in the world. They can take care of most of your problems. What I mean when I talk about prepping a site, I mean killing plants that are hard to kill. Now, if all you have to kill to plant a garden or change a landscape is turf grass, that's an easy job. Turf grass is barely alive to start with. It has very shallow roots. It doesn't take much to kill it. So a lot of different methods will work. What's commonly used is a sod cutter, which is kind of a shame because generally when people use a sod cutter, they roll up the sod, they haul it off, they do terrible things to it. If you can use a sod cutter or some kind of method of cutting sod and then just flip the sod over and let it die in the sun in the middle of the summer, that works. I did that here when I planted this Virginia fringe tree. I had to do a little flipping around once in a while, but I killed it and pretty easily. Without a lot of work, I left all the soil there and a lot of the microbes that were in the soil, I left them there, so that's good. But for turf grass, you can use methods like the smothering methods. Here I use newspaper, you can use cardboard with wood chips. That'll kill turf grass, it'll kill clover, creeping Charlie. But these dandelions you see on the left, when the newspaper decomposes, they're going to come right up through it. They're not going to be hurt. So it's not going to work for your persistent weeds. You can use black plastic, but it's the same thing. It's not going to kill your persistent weeds. I tried it on lily of the valley one time. It didn't work at all. But you leave it on turf grass for the summer, or at least 2 or 3 months, and it'll kill it very effectively. You can use glyphosate. Here, this is for a seeded meadow that's going to go in, prairie meadow. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be thorough. This isn't a job for just anybody to do. And then, of course, you're using chemicals. And so it isn't ideal. And it's not going to kill everything. Some things just have too much underground energy storage. A great example is quackgrass, which you see on the left here. These rhizomes, I did a site prep for a Roy Diblick sedge meadow almost 10 years ago. And you go back now, we didn't even notice it had quackgrass in it when we killed off the turf. But you go back now, the glyphosate translocated through those rhizomes just so far, and then it ran out of gas. And it left little pieces of rhizome in the soil, and they grew. And they were no longer getting mowed. They no longer had the competition of the turf grass. And now you go back and it's a sea of quackgrass. There is a sedge meadow underneath it, but it really didn't work at all because it didn't have the maintenance that it took to get rid of it. But you can dig these out. You can dig out anything. If you see white of any size whatsoever, you have to remove it. Little fibrous roots you don't have to worry about, but anything of any size, you're going to have to remove. And this is really hard on the soil. What's really hard on is the soil microbes, because the microbes, there's all these organisms living in your soil, all cooperating. 30 to 40% of a plant's food production is fed to the microbes. And plants don't just do this out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing this because they get things in return. The microbes are the hardest workers in your garden. And so you need to be nice to them. When you tear up the soil, you're destroying microbes and you're making them have to work even harder than they have to. And, so don't do that. So what are you going to do when you have a mess like this? To the right here is my property where you see flowers. To the left, most of this picture is my neighbor's, which has an abundance of really nasty plants that are hard to kill. This thing has thugs, persistent weeds, and garden thugs. The weeds are quackgrass, field bindweed, Canada thistle, smooth brome, Canada goldenrod. The thugs are bishopsweed, also called goutweed, or the variegated form is called snow on the mountain. Lily of the valley, purple leaf winter creeper, oriental pachysandra, gooseneck loosestrife, creeping bellflower, lamium, vinca minor, hoodiana, however you pronounce it. It's a really hard plant to kill. Hostas are also hard to kill, as are daylilies. Many of us have dealt with these plants and had a lot of trouble getting rid of them. Every one of these was in this space. So how are you going to kill it? What I use and am using, and it's working, is green wood chips. I learned about this method from a woman who is a researcher at the University of Washington. You listen out your window, and when you hear a big commercial chipper going, that means that there's a tree crew working in your neighborhood. Walk over, make sure they're cutting down a live tree, and then ask them, stay out of the way, wave your arm, don't go get in their way, but when they come over and talk to you, ask them if they need a place to dump. And in many cases, they do. They'd be real happy to come just drive around the corner and dump and go back to work. So have them come over, dump, spread the stuff out 1.5 feet thick. It took me, I'm old and slow, so it took me, all of an afternoon to spread out that load of wood chips. And it works really well. What it does is it burns everything down, and then, there's a method of killing stuff called death by 1,000 cuts. Well, what this does, and by death by 1,000 cuts means you just keep cutting it off, cutting it off, cutting it off, and runs out of energy. What this is a death by 1,000 cuts machine. The plants get burned down. Every time they try to grow back up into these wood chips, they get burned back down, and they run out of energy, and they die. So this works great. It takes time. When I did this, I did it late in the season. Because of the way that it works, if you do it early in the season, it works much better because it keeps growing. This was late September when I did this. So nothing came up that fall, but the next spring, a few Kenneth thistle came up, and I grabbed them, pulled them out. They never came back. The quackgrass never came back. The goutweed did come back in very small, very weak little stems, and I hoed them out, and they quit coming back. Everything's quit coming back except for the field bindweed. I really think if I'd done this earlier in the year, it would have worked better, so it kept coming back. I kept hoeing it out. It kept coming back, so I got more wood chips. Saw another tree crew working. Had them come over, and on the left here where I had bindweed, I put another 10 inches, and it's worked. I had chips left over, so I expanded this future garden. Here you see pachysandra and purple leaf winter creeper both getting choked out by more wood chips. Now you'll notice there's little trees coming up through here. I work around them. As long as you don't bury them completely, they don't like having all these chips piled up against them, but they'll handle it, and they'll keep growing, and as the chips decompose, you'll have a tree there. So after I finally ended up getting a total of 3 loads. You'll see over on the right where the bindweed problems were. It's pretty thick, but it's working. And what you do is you leave this for a couple years. It's under control. It's a lot better than the mess that was there before. And then the chips just continue to decompose, and then you can plant right into the decomposing wood chips, all the organic matter. We tried this at a place where I used to work. We had a tree crew who dumped right on an area where there were a lot of noxious weeds, came back a year later, planted right into the decomposing wood chips, and then a year after that, it looked like this. Now, of course, this garden, you see, it still has a long ways to go to fill in, but it will. You take a garden like this is a second-year garden in the spring. It looks pretty sparse, doesn't it? But here it is a month later, really filling in. And here it is a little over a year later, really filled in, because the plants will take care of this stuff for you. So, to summarize, If you're dealing with easy to kill plants like turfgrass, use any of the smothering methods. They work great. For tough perennial weeds and sharp and garden thugs, use fresh green wood chips. Do this early in the season. It works better. Make sure the chips are from a live tree. Spread them out over a foot thick. Be patient. Monitor. Hoe out any resprouts. Later, plant directly into the decomposing chips. Watch the plants fill in, because they will. Because, it really is all about the chips, all about the plants. So thank you very much. Try this method. It works great. You can kill things that you wouldn't be able to kill any other way, or that would be a lot of work. So you take care. Bye-bye.